Welcome back to the Sports Lab podcast. We got a lot to get into today. NHL trade deadline, NFL free agency. I'm joined with me today, co-host Thomas Bailey, as this was a pretty crazy deadline overall for the NHL. A lot of big trades. I mean, right at the buzzer, we just had Brad Marchand get traded to the Florida Panthers. The return is yet to be at least announced on social media. I've been scouring to try and find it. Mikko Rantanen got traded for a second time. Kevyn Adams actually made a big move. Shocker. Definitely a seller's market. Brock Nelson to the Avalanche. Olivia Borkstrand to Tampa Bay. There's just a lot of moves. We'll talk about a lot of the big ones that have happened over these last, 48 hours. Just pretty busy overall. Not to mention, we have some NFL news to get into. Terrell Bernard was just locked up earlier this morning. There's going to be some other Bills things we can talk about. A lot of moves around the NFL. As a lot of big name guys have been in trade, have either requested trades or gotten released. Just there a lot. I feel like a lot more than years past. So there's a lot to get into today. But we will start with the NHL trade deadline. As moments ago, Brad Marchand, the Rat, was traded to the Florida Panthers to now potentially be at a line with Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett. I don't know if that's what they'll do, but like the Rat line, I guess. The Sabres had the kid line, they'll have the Rat line. And the return is still yet to be known. But Thomas, what are your thoughts on that move, just knowing that Marchand went to Florida?
That's like the most disgusting thing. We've seen this so much over the last few seasons, really, where a lot of these teams in the specifically the Atlantic Division are traded within division and stay in that same division for the entire duration. Like, look at Linus Ullmark. He goes from the Sabres to the Bruins to the Senators, all within the Atlantic Division. So you see this happen a lot. Casey Middlestat goes to the Bruins earlier today. Henry Jokiharju was just traded to them. Dylan Cousins goes to the Senators. So just, again, there's so many teams that are traded in the division all the time. I don't really care for Brad Marchand as a person, but a player, you already know what you're going to get. He's a great forward. He's a very good leader, antagonist, most definitely. Him and Sam Bennett on the same line would make a lot of sense. Just a physical duo there. Great come playoff time. Florida's probably going to be giving up a first-round pick in this trade, I'd have to imagine at least. So I do think for the most part that this is a good deal for both sides. The Bruins, they're in really hell right now with how their season went. They just traded Frederick last night to the Oilers. So you've seen a lot of different
Coyle earlier today.
Coyle today. They did get Middlestat back in return, though, so I wouldn't call that a selling move.
Which is kind of like the Marchand replacement.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't call that a selling move on their part for that. But I do think nonetheless that the Bruins are moving towards, kind of conservative selling for this deadline. Again, like you mentioned, it's a seller's market. They're trying to retool and be back before next season. So obviously a first-round pick probably isn't the greatest thing for Marchand, but I'd expect it to be flipped in the offseason. Nonetheless, though, I do think that this Bruins team definitely needed this at this point in this moment, I guess, for this team. I think it's kind of sad because Brad Marchand was really the last leg of that team with Zdeno Chara and Patrice Bergeron and all those great Bruins that we saw in the 2010s through 2020s. Yeah, all of them. So to kind of see that happen, it is a little sad, but I do think that
it's not. I'm a Sabres fan.
Well, it's still sad, though. Like, it's a nostalgic part for me, man. But nonetheless, I do think that it's a good trade for Florida. I think that that's going to bring a lot of intensity to the locker room, especially come playoff time when it's going to matter the most. So looking to go on another deep run in the playoffs in a pretty, in my opinion, weak Eastern Conference this year. So we'll see what ends up happening. But, yeah, makes a lot of sense for both parties involved. And let's see if Florida can make it turn into something for a cup.
Yeah, here's another trade. This is probably a name you haven't heard of in a while. Shea Weber got traded. Utah traded Shea Weber, Victor Soderstrom, and Akurati to Utah for a 6th-round pick. It looks like they were just trying to get it. Basically, just threw in players to get off of Shea Weber's contract. Chicago's just completely tanking. They're taking out whatever they can. Kind of makes sense. But I just wanted to mention that quickly because no one's heard of Shea Weber in a couple years due to him basically medically retiring. He's just riding the LTIR money, which smart by him. Take advantage of the NHL rules while you can. But yeah, on this Marchand and Marchand to Florida move, I think this is a very good move for Florida. I don't know the package yet, but again, probably around a prospect, a pick, and maybe one of like their bottom sixers, maybe a defenseman. I'm not exactly sure what they gave up. I still haven't been able to find it. If we do find it, I will update you, but I haven't seen it yet. But either way, definitely a good move for Florida to be able to get someone like this, as it looks like the East has come down to a 2-team race. It's Tampa, it's Florida. They're going to meet probably in the second round, and the winner that's going to walk through. I think through the Eastern Conference. It looks like they're the two best teams, clearly, because I don't trust Washington. Carolina just messed up in the Rantanen situation. Jack Hughes is out for the year. None of the wildcard teams look ready to take a run yet, and Toronto's a playoff choker. So it's going to be Florida versus Tampa, and whoever comes out of that is probably going to have to face whoever makes through the gauntlet of the West, because while the West has gotten – it's an arms race out there. As we get into our next move, Mikko Rantanen traded for the second time this trade deadline. One of the biggest players traded in recent memory, and he got traded twice within like a month. He got traded to the Dallas Stars for Logan Stankoven and 2 first-round picks, as the Carolina Hurricanes were not able to agree with him on an extension, so they traded him away so they didn't lose him for nothing in the offseason. And for Dallas, they're buying all in. They decided we'll trade with as long as we get an extension in place. They were able to. I saw at first it was 8 years, like 12 and a half. But Thomas, you said you saw like 13 and a half to up to 15. He got like something crazy. Either way, for Dallas, it totally makes sense, because what has always killed them in the playoffs every year? And it is being able to get a legitimate goal scorer who can put the puck in the net when the pressure's on. They have a lot of good players. Roope Hintz, Wyatt Johnson, Jason Robertson, Miro Heiskanen. They have very good players. They just don't have that superstar that you can trust to be able to put the game away. Mikko Rantanen is kind of that guy to go with how deep that team is and how good their goalie is. They could easily make a run. I mean, they made it to 6 games last year in the Western Conference Finals to Edmonton. And then now you add someone like this, they could easily go and win the Cup this year. But Thomas, what are your thoughts on the trade?
Yeah, so officially it's going to be an 8-year, $98 million, so 12.25. So they actually did get him at a little bit cheaper of a cap hit than I was expecting, anticipating wise. It is with a full no move clause, though, effective immediately, no 1 year to kick in like it was for Elias Pettersson and other players we've seen in the past. But overall, getting Logan Stankoven back for a player like Mikko Rantanen is a big deflating thing for the Hurricanes. I understand it's not just that, it's 2 first-round picks, but those first-round picks mean absolutely zero to this team right now, because the deadline has just passed. You didn't trade those picks to get better other way, so those are just picks right now. And because of that, I don't like this trade at all for Carolina. I think that their GM's a box of bricks at this point. I don't know why you even traded for Rantanen in the first place if you wanted a contract extension with him, considering you traded for him 2 weeks before the trade deadline. And you're like, oh, yeah, we can get a trade and fix it beforehand. That's the equivalent of me trying to go back to my ex 2 weeks ago and try to get something back, and just, oh, I can fix her kind of mentality. Is this crazy at this point? You had 2 weeks to get a contract extension in place. That's not enough time in the NHL, especially with a player like Rantanen, who's been firm all season with a contending Avalanche team already that he did not want to return. So it makes so much sense to them. And then you go and trade him. I think the only way this could have been worse for the Carolina Hurricanes was if they would have traded him somewhere within the conference. And so because they didn't trade him in conference, good job. But other than that, this is a terrible trade on their part. I like Logan Stankoven. I think he's a good player, but when it's just him for a superstar like Mikko Rantanen, you can't be happy with that return. I understand the 2 first-round picks, but they're probably going to be anywhere from 28 to 32 for the next 2 years. So those aren't going to be high-end first-round picks, You're not going to be getting top 10 selections with those picks. So it's just it's really useless to the Hurricanes at this point. They don't need prospects. They need players that can actually play at a high level currently, like Mikko Rantanen, like a player they just had, and they get rid of him at the deadline for really nothing. I hate that move for them. As for the Stars, what a deal. What a absolute fleecing in this contract dispute. 8 years, $12.25 million a season, which is absolutely ridiculous to say the least, to start. So not only do you get him at a cheaper cap hit than what he wanted, because he wanted up to 14 to 15 mil. You get him $2 million cheaper. You also use that money to re-sign Wyatt Johnston earlier today on a 5-year contract worth $8.4 million a season. I love the move. I love the move entirely. You're trading 2 first-round picks that were probably going to be garbage anyway. Now we know for certain that they're most likely going to be, because you have one of the top 15 players in the game traded for 2 first-round picks and a decent level guy. And it's mind-boggling to me on Carolina's side. I'd probably give them like a D in this trade, because there's still potential to go and flip those firsts. But if they don't, I'm giving them an F instantly. And then on the other side for Dallas, this is an A+. You hit it out of the park. You got a great player. You got him on a contract for a long term, and you didn't have to overpay for the guy. Win, win, win for the Dallas Stars. I'd be rioting in the streets if I was a Dallas fan.
Yeah. We're going to move on to our next trade. This one happened last night. The Islanders trade Brock Nelson, 50% retained, and William Dufour to the Colorado Avalanche for Callum Ritchie, Oliver Kylington, a first and a third. My initial thoughts on it would probably be, I think it's a little bit of an overpay. I think that is Brock Nelson, even at 50% retained, really worth your best prospect and a first? Probably not, but in a seller's market, I get it. I understand why you had to do it. And then for the Islanders, they were not going to be that good this year. There doesn't look like they're going to make the playoffs. And Brock Nelson's an expiring deal. He's a good player, but they kind of were just that middling of the road team where their prospect pool is looking really bad. Now you add Cole Yzerman from the draft from 2 years ago. You're going to probably get a top 10 pick this year. Callum Ritchie, the first round pick from Colorado, even though it'll be pretty high. You're going to be able to start building that prospect pool back up. So in the offseason, if you really want to make another run at it, you can now go retool the roster, or you can continue to build back down. And then in 3-4 years, maybe you make a run back at it again, kind of go through a little bit of a rebuild. And I think this is a good way to jumpstart on that. So I think the Islanders won this trade, but at the same time, Colorado in a seller's market is just trying to replace what they lost in Mikko Rantanen, and they need more offensive upside. And Brock Nelson is a very good player. So I understand the deal for sure. I think that I would probably give Colorado a B- probably. I think they overpaid a little bit, but it's understandable. And I give an A for the Islanders to get that much out of someone like Brock Nelson.
Yeah, I think very similar grades are in order here for me as well. I think that Dufour is only part of this trade to make it work for overall contracts on a team, because you're allowed to have 50 contracts on a team for each side here. Both of these teams going into this trade had 50 contracts exactly. So you have to trade 2 players if you're trying to get 2 players back in return. So that's why getting Kylington and Callum Ritchie back, you have to send Dufour and Nelson the other way. Just make the overall contract dispute work. Overall, though, for Colorado, while this seems like an overpay, at the same time, it could be an underpay too, as they do get to choose whether it's the 2026 first or 2027 first. They're given all the way up until 2 days before the draft this year to make that decision. So after the draft lottery odds come out and you see who all is picking where, just in case they miss the playoffs, on the off chance they do, they probably don't. But they would get to choose based off, like, let's say they lose in the second round or the first round to Dallas or something, or Winnipeg. They get to choose that they could keep this year's first round pick and then give them the 2027 pick. So they get a lot of flexibility with that. The 2028 second, which could be, well, the third that could become a second, depending on if the trade goes out to be better with Brock Nelson. It's basically that would only happen if Brock Nelson is signed long-term. So if they re-sign him in the offseason, that will turn into a second-round pick, although that is very unlikely. So for my own perspective, I think that's going to stay a third. I do think that I like that Colorado gets to choose which draft pick they give up in that situation. It gives them a lot more leverage. And then overall, getting rid of Callum Ritchie is probably the biggest blow for the Avalanche fans here. One of your best prospects by far, definitely the best prospect in your system right now. And right after you got rid of Mikko Rantanen, a lot of Colorado fans probably not too happy about that, especially when the best guy you go out and get in return other than that is Charlie Coyle and then you give them Middlestat for him. So with the Middlestat trade, I think Brock Nelson will be center number 2 on that Colorado Avalanche team now. I really like that behind Nathan McKinnon. So I think Brock Nelson's a great player for 1 year, but if you're talking like an overall like trade-wise here for the Islanders, I love this deal. You're getting rid of a veteran forward that you probably weren't going to bring back anyway. You get a first-round pick and a third-round pick, maybe even a second, depending on how stupid Colorado ends up being. And you get Callum Ritchie. That's a fleecing if I've ever seen one. So give them an A. And then as for the Colorado Avalanche, I think I'm going to give them a solid B here. I think they did a good job here. Maybe a little bit of an overpay, but I'm going to give them a B instead of a B- because you get to choose whether that's a 2026 or 2027 first-round pick. So like the trade for them. You're making a move like the other teams in the West had to. At that point, you can't be the guy who sits there and does nothing. If you're the pawn that doesn't move while all the other pawns are moving, you're never going to reach the end of the board first. It's just how it goes. So because of that, you got to make sure that you do something with it. And they went out and did the best they could with Brock Nelson.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Very, very good trade for the Islanders, and you're going all in if you're Colorado, and it makes sense. You're in a win now situation. This is the final trade we're going to talk about before we get into the Sabres. Olivier Bjorkstrand and Yadi Gorday to the Tampa Bay Lightning for 2 firsts, a second, and a prospect. I think that this is a little bit of an overpay again, but Tampa desperately needed middle sixers because that top end talent they had in that forward core was best in the league. That bottom end was pretty bad. So I think the fact that you're able to you got 2 guys to fit in there. You really now were like 7 or 8 deep in that forward core. I think it's a great move for you guys. Again, you're kind of contending right now. It's not like really you didn't even have to give up your best prospects. So I think that this is a very good move. I would probably give about a B+ for Tampa. I think they're going all in. They gave up picks, but those are going to be late round picks. A second that they got from a different trade. And then they kept their top prospects. So they still have some young guys that can come up through the system. And they go and get 2 very important guys. And then for the Kraken, I think this is a great trade to be able to get 2 firsts and a second for these guys that you weren't going to really want to pay. They're older. You need to go through a rebuild because it looks like the core you tried to ride it with just is not working out. Just a lot of older guys that didn't really perform very well. And I think this is a great trade for them. I would give them like an A+. I thought they hit it out of the park. I think this is a great way for them to start their rebuild. What about you?
I really like this move a lot for all the teams involved. I mean, the Red Wings were just kind of the middleman here. But one thing that is a little bit of a loophole that a lot more GMs have kind of exploited these last couple of years is the 3-team aspect, which is you trade a player who the Red Wings here. Yanni Gourde was traded from the Kraken, who retained 50% of his salary. He was traded to the Red Wings with Oliver Bjorkstrand. So both of them were traded to the Red Wings, retained 50% of their salary. And then the Red Wings traded them to the Tampa Bay Lightning, 50% retained. So you retained 50% of their deal twice. So if he's got $6 million on his contract, 50% from Seattle brings it down to $3 million, 50% more from the Red Wings, and it's now $1.5 million for Oliver Bjorkstrand is what they're going to be paying. That's an absolute fleece job if I've ever seen one. It allows them the ultimate flexibility to go out and get someone else. And that's exactly what they did. They go out and get both in the one trade. You're bringing back a familiar face in Yanni Gourde, who was with this team when they won back-to-back Stanley Cups. So bringing him back, a familiar face, a familiar player within the system. And then a forward that I absolutely love for this team, Oliver Bjorkstrand. In my opinion, I thought they were going to take Alex Tuch from us. And if Alex Tuch wasn't going to be the guy, then Oliver Bjorkstrand made the most sense behind him. They're both big right wingers that can really move the puck. They can play that physical element. They can do everything you ask. Playmaking, they're 2-way forwards is all it is. And that's what Tampa loves so much. Look at Anthony Cirelli. He's been there. He's a main staple on the team. He's a 2-way forward. And they love their 2-way game. Bjorkstrand offers that at the best capacity on the deadline market. So because of that, I love that move for them. They also get Aucoin. I'm not sure if you know who that is, but he's an undrafted defenseman from the Red Wings. He was traded to the Seattle Kraken originally in the deal because they have to send something back to the Kraken. It couldn't have been just for future considerations because they retain 50%. It's a weird thing that is interesting to note, but in order to basically quote unquote cheat the system in that, you have to send a player back. You can't retain 50% salary on a future considerations deal. It's just not how it works. So they had to send Aucoin back just to make it work. But either way, for Tampa Bay, those 2 first-round picks are both top 10 protected for the Kraken, but I love that for them. Still going to be getting 2 first-round picks, which is definitely going to help kickstart that rebuild. You really needed it. You need that retooling. They haven't been the same after that year 1 surge that we saw make it the second round in their first year as a franchise. So I guess for Tampa Bay, about as good as it gets here. You get better and you get to compete with the not Tampa Bay, but Florida Panthers. And I think they kind of saw the market and they saw what other teams in the East were doing. They were like, you know what? This East doesn't look that great this year. Jack Hughes is out for the year. This wild card team race doesn't look that great. Let's go out and trade and go all in because this is probably one of our best years of the Cup. So they saw Florida going out and making trades. They had to go and do something as well, and they did here. I love the move for Tampa Bay. I'm going to give them an A- just because 2 first-round picks is a little pricey, even though they're probably going to be back end of the firsts. And then other than that, for Seattle, I also like this trade a lot. I'm going to give them an A- as well. I think they did great. And then obviously Detroit, I'll give like a C just because, you're the middleman. You didn't really do too much. You got a couple picks back. Nothing crazy. So solid C because it's just average.
Yes. As we move into now the Sabres, now we're up to 3 trades as the Sabres traded Nicholas Aube-Kubel to the Rangers for Eric Bäckström right at the buzzer.
Bäckström.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
And that goes along with us trading Henry Jokiharju to Boston for I still have no idea. Some of these trades are taking forever to give me the details, and it's pissing me off because I want to talk about it.
They're still pending deals.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. So, anyways, and then Henry Jokiharju to Boston, and then the big one that we're going to talk about, Dylan Cousins finally gets traded out of Buffalo. Fans have been saying it for a while. A lot of people want him in a Pettersson trade. A lot of people just wanted him traded for whatever. There's this, that, and the third. He ends up getting in a shocker, kind of. A lot of people didn't expect him to trade at the deadline. Most people thought it would be an off-season type thing. He gets traded to a division rival in Ottawa, and it was Dylan Cousins, Dennis Gilbert, and a second-round pick to Ottawa for Josh Norris and why am I blanking on it?
Jacob Bernard Docker.
Jacob Bernard Docker. I can only remember the Bernard part because it was a funny joke that 2 Bernard defensemen were in Buffalo news today with Terrell Bernard's extension. That's why I could just remember that. But yes, Bernard Docker. What are your thoughts on this deal? I personally like it, but you can get into it first.
Yeah, I really love this deal for Buffalo. I mean, you have a forward who was really just not doing too much for us and Dylan Cousins. I think what this trade was a lot of a change of scenery deal for both of these guys. I think Josh Norris hasn't played his best hockey with Senators after that one breakout season where he got the payday. And then as for the opposite side here, Dylan Cousins hasn't really had that great season like at all yet. So I think it was just a change of scenery moment for these 2 guys. They're 2 forwards with immense potential that I think could become very good forwards in their respective systems if they find that right fit. And I think that this is just them trying to see if this is the right fit now with these 2 different moves. Honestly, for the Sabres, I love this move because, it's the back end of the season. You're trading Dylan Cousins to the Senators, and you're getting Josh Norris back in return. I really like getting Josh Norris because you can see if he fits the team and stuff like that right now. And if he doesn't, you could also throw him into a trade for the offseason if you really wanted to go out and trade your first and Norris potentially. Not that necessarily I'd say I'd do that, but I'm saying you never know. He could fit better or worse with the Sabres. I do think he'll fit better, though, with the Lindy Ruff style. As for the defensive side here for Jacob Bernard Docker, I love the move for us. We needed the right shot heavily, especially after trading Jokiharju today. I don't think we would have traded Jokiharju if we didn't get Bernard Docker in this. So I do think that makes a lot of sense for Buffalo to go out there and make that kind of a trade. I like Bernard Docker as well. I think he basically is just a swap with Dennis Gilbert. Again, one of those situations where you have 50 players for both of these 2 teams under contract right now. So you have to trade Dylan Cousins and Dennis Gilbert in return for Josh Norris and Bernard Docker because it has to be 2 players for 2 players. So because of that, I do think that it makes a lot of sense for Bernard Docker to be a Buffalo Sabre. He's going to bring that physical element on a nightly basis. And I know this is a little bit off track, but you just mentioned Eric Brandstrom getting traded to the Buffalo Sabres, which I think is funny because him and Bernard Docker used to be line mates with the Ottawa Senators when they both played for Ottawa when they were both first drafted. So I do think that makes a lot of sense. And I think realistically, getting both of them makes a ton of sense for this team, not only because it was a cheap price for Brandstrom, but because we also traded Yoki Haru. So we needed a defenseman, and we also traded Gilbert. So 2 defensemen gone, 2 new defensemen added. Makes too much sense for Buffalo here. I love that move. And then overall here for the Senators, I think that Dylan Cozens is a solid fit for this team. I'm just not sure if he's going to be able to break out for them. And then you get that second round pick, which I'm really upset about because 2026 is projected to be the best draft class since 2016 or 15 even. And because of that, I do think that this 2026 draft class is going to feature a lot of players that could go in the first round, and any other draft fall to the second round. And we're not going to have a second round pick. It's going to be the Senators. So unfortunately for us, that's a little bit unfortunate. But getting Bernard Docker and, of course, Josh Norris makes so much sense for this team. You're trying to get better, and you're trying to do this without going through the prospect pool again. You want to be able to get players that can play at a good level right now. You don't want to keep playing through that prospect game. Because of that, I love this move for Buffalo. I'm going to give them a solid A- for this trade. I think $7.1 million off the books for Dylan Cozens is amazing for the team. It's going to help with cap situations. Bringing back Zucker today and bringing back Greenway a couple of days ago. So those trades, that trade makes room for those contracts to basically even out. And then for the Senators side, I think they got a little bit better of value with that second round pick added. But I still don't like the Dylan Cozens move. I'm going to have to say B-. I just don't know why you're switching up the locker room at this point in the season when the team has been playing very solid. They're still in the playoff race. They definitely could take over one of those 2 final wildcard spots for the East. So I do think that it makes a lot of sense for them to keep their core. Unfortunately for them, they trade Josh Norris for Dylan Cozens. Hopefully it works out for them. Technically, I'm hoping it doesn't, but, I guess we'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah, so if I had to give a grade on both, I would give Buffalo probably just a B, just because it's risky with Josh Norris' health. I like the trade. And then for Ottawa, I'd probably have to give a C just because it's also risky. If Dylan Cozens doesn't return to form, that is probably one of the worst contracts in the league. If he continues to play the way he has, you're hoping that maybe if you're Dylan Cozens in Ottawa, that just getting him out of Buffalo, it would be like a Reinhart or an Eichel situation. Obviously not to that extent because he's just never been that good of a player. But that's kind of what Ottawa's looking for, but it's very risky. And then for Buffalo, it's like Josh Norris, I think, is a similar player to Dylan Cozens, but he fits us a lot better. He's a better goal scorer. He's better on the power play. He's more physical. He's better at defense. He's not as good at moving the puck. He's not going to get as many assists, but that's why you put him on a second line with guys who are capable passers. And then you can let him kind of be like the goal scorer of the line. You put him with like a Zucker. You put him with a Kulich. You put him with a Benson. You put him with these guys who are good at passing the puck. And then I think there could be a lot of very good results that come out of that. I think that Josh Norris could be another 30-goal scorer if he can stay healthy, but that's where I only give the Sabres a B. It's an F. He's had shoulder problems. He's had injury history. He's played a pretty good amount of games this year, 53 games so far. And Dylan Cozens has played 61. Norris has 3 more points and 9 more goals. And since the start of 2021, Josh Norris is 6th in the league in power play goals per game or whatever. Number 3 is Tage Thompson. So now we have 2 of statistically the 6 best power play scorers in the league, which could hopefully help fix our power play. I think you have Josh Norris kind of run that second power play because right now we have a decent first power play. Obviously, Thompson is very good at what he does. I think you stick Norris on that second power play, or maybe you just put him on the first and you just have one very, very good power play. And Norris is also one of Dylan Cozens' underrated parts of his game was his faceoffs. Josh Norris is just as good, if not a little bit better. So you add that, but really you add defense because we need our forwards to be better defense, and you just add more physicality. Even if Josh it's not like some bruiser like Brady Tkachuk. Basically, anyone's more of a bruiser than Dylan Cozens right now. He's Charmin ultra soft. And then you also get Bernard Crocker or whatever. I don't know why I can't
Docker.
remember his what Docker.
Docker.
Why do what?
Bernard Docker.
Docker. Yes, Bernard Docker. You get him, and then you have about 20 games to see if he works with Owen Power. You need a right shot defenseman who can actually play defense. That's the issue. Matthias Samuelson's fallen off, and Henry Okihari can't play defense. So you just have been struggling to find someone to play defense with Power. And that is what Bernard Docker is known for. He's known to be able to play defense. He's known to be able to be physical. Now you have that kind of safety net that you allow Power to cook offensively because that's what he is. He's a very good offensive defenseman. He's never going to be this elite bruiser, and that we don't need him to be that. We didn't draft him to be that. We drafted him to be basically like Darlene White, like Darlene Jr., just a little bit worse version of Darlene to run that second pairing. So now you need to pair him with another right shot who can play defense. You hope that helps Power take that step in his game like it did with when Samuelson was actually good with Darlene. And you have 20 games to figure it out. If it doesn't work out, then you're not all right. In the offseason, you put Bernard Docker in that third pair, and you have to go out and you have to get a second pair defenseman for Power. If it does work, it's like, all right, we have that now. Now we can look at getting just a third pair defenseman. So I think giving us that 20-game sample size to be able to work through, I think is very good. But I want to ask you this. Now that the Sabres season is basically done for at least this season, what do you want to see out of the team for the rest of the year?
I just want to see us figure out what works and what doesn't at this point. You got to be able to give, like you're mentioning, put Bernard Docker on Owen Power's line. I want to see him pair up with Darlene maybe. I want you guys to try things and test this out and see what's working and what's not working, because this offseason is the most important offseason. If Kevin Adams isn't fired, this is the most important offseason of his life, really.
This is the most important Sabres offseason in the last 15 years, if we're being
exactly
honest.
And because of that, I do think that you really need to figure out what works and what doesn't, so we know exactly down to the absolute second what we need to go and get this offseason. I want to know what his I want to know where he's from type shit. I want to know that we want a player from Stockholm, Sweden. I want to know down to the last second of we want a guy who was born on March 7th, 2017 or something. I want to know to the last detail what we absolutely need this offseason. And if we don't have that, I think that this is going to be another frustrating offseason to say the least. I do think that Bowen Byram is likely gone at this point. I'm a little annoyed that we didn't trade him at the deadline just because it would have saved us a little bit of a headache. But I do think that he offers a little bit more value now versus the offseason because, you can still use him as a rental before the offseason as well. So I do think it's just going to come down to the fundamentals really for this team. Just what we need and what we can do with those needs versus, just going out and just saying, you know what, it hasn't worked. Let's just keep doing it. I want to see you try things because what's the worst that happens? You guys start losing? Oh, no.
That's not the worst thing. That's
we haven't done that all season.
That's the best thing that could happen.
See, that's the thing. Is the worst thing that happens is we start winning games and, the team's actually decent. But at the same time, then for next season that stuff's actually going to work out. And so I really do think that at the end of the day, you really have to go out and see what we need down to the details. Okay, we need a right shot defenseman. Do we want him to be an offensive defenseman or a defensive defenseman or a two-way defenseman? Do you want him to be able to do both? Do you want a forward
Which pairing do we need
guy?
Him for?
Do you want a guy who's a right shot winger? Do you want a left shot winger? Do you need someone for the fourth line? I want to know everything that is possible to know before this season ends so the offseason blueprint can be made before the offseason actually starts, because unless that happens, we're going to be continuously inept at making decisions in the offseason. And Kevin Adams, I'm talking to your stupid fucking ass. Please, for the love of God, do it, because this is your job. This is your job. Yeah. You signed up for this shit, now do it. And that's all I'm asking for the rest of the season is just be consistent and see what we can do.
Yeah, I completely agree. Kind of just feel things out, see how things work, test things. But at the end of the day, I want us to lose games. I want us to be competitive. I want us to lose this 8-1 every game, but I want us to be competitive. I want it to at least be semi-enjoyable hockey when I force myself to watch. I want us to see us score some goals. I want to talk Thompson, Peterka to continue their great seasons just for confidence levels and just so I can defend them in the offseason, be like, look how good he is. But really, I want us to lose. I want us to hopefully end up with third best lottery odds, and then maybe we can get lucky and we can get the first pick in the draft, or we can get the second behind Chicago, because I think that's the only way we can end up with Matthew Schaefer. I think if Chicago ends up with the first pick, I don't see them going another defenseman. I see them trying to get a competent forward with Bedard. But if anyone else gets the first pick, I think they go Schaefer because he's probably the best player in this class. So if we can get either the second behind Chicago or the first pick and get Matthew Schaefer, and then we go and say we sign someone big in free agency, and then we have Dahlin plus person we sign, and then Power, Schaefer, and then Bernard Docker and like a Ryan Johnson, Jacob Bryson, fill in here. I think that defense score is that defense score has me feeling some way. I think, or maybe you put Schaefer on the first line with Dahlin to help his development better, and then you put the guy we signed, the veteran, with Power to help his development. I think that could work too, and that would be a dream scenario. But this leads me into what my dream offseason would be like acquisition wise. What I want are like forward core and a defense core to look like going into next season. Another note, Lindy Ruff, I just don't think he's a good coach. I don't think it's going to happen. I want Lindy fired. I was talked into thinking it was a good hire to begin with. It's not. You saw New Jersey fire him, and they got a lot better this year. And the player poll during the season, a lot of players said they don't want to play. He was like the second highest coach they don't want to play for. And the main reasons was the game has passed him by. He's kind of just an old head. I just don't think he has enough X's and O's. I get the rough and tough, but it hasn't even worked. The Sabres mentally are so weak. That's why they choke so many leads. That's why they've started lately. They keep starting out first periods, and it's like, this is the worst first period I've ever seen. And they followed up the next game with an even worse one. I mean, you saw, or they just fall apart like they did against San Jose, like they did against Tampa. They either start slow or they end terribly. It's one or the other. And I think a lot of that has to do with coaching. I just don't think Lindy's a good coach anymore. I wouldn't be upset if we literally fired Lindy and fired every single one of her coaches and just started clean. I wouldn't be upset if we kept like a Seth Afford or something and maybe moved him off the power play. But we clearly don't have enough X's and O's, guys. We need to bring more in, and I just don't think Lindy's the answer. I don't think it happens, but I think we should fire Lindy, and I think we should get a new coach. But moving into player personnel, I drew up a dream line, and this is not, it's realistic if Kevin Adams had a pair of balls, is what I would say. Do I think he does? No. So do I expect this to happen? Not a chance, but it's realistic if he had a set of nuts. Because right now we're at about 22 million cap space. So this is what I'm going to start with, how we get more cap space. Mattias Samuelsson, you cut or trade, if you buy him out or you trade him, that saves $3 to $4 million. Connor Clifton, the same thing. If you cut or trade him, you save $2 to $3 million. And then Sam Lafferty and Peyton Krebs are both, you trade both of them away, that saves another $3.6 million. So I would estimate between those four moves, you can get to about 32 million cap space. So then who we start with, who are we bringing back? I think just JJ Peterka. Maybe like a Jacob Bryson for the bottom, or Ryan Johnson for the bottom pair defenseman. But on the forward core, just JJ Peterka. Let Jack Quinn walk. Let Bowen Byram walk, a.k.a. trade his rights away or something like that, where we get picks back or / prospects in return, so we get something. And then this is where we have 32. I think Peterka is probably going to cost around 6 or 7. I'm fine with shelling that out. We'll put it at 7. So that brings you to about 25 mil. Then this is the big fish that I want to go and get. I've been saying it since before the season started. Let's go get Mitch Marner. After Toronto eventually loses in the first round again to Tampa this year, they're going to be like, all right, this forward core isn't working. They're going to want to make big changes. Mitch Marner is the guy. I don't care about how he doesn't have a lot of playoff success, because I just want to make it to the playoffs. We can have the argument about him not being good in the playoffs once we actually make it there. He is elite in the regular season, and I think you have your first line being Tage, Tuck, JJ Peterka. That line we've shown has proven some very good results. Then your second line, Josh Norris, Mitch Marner, Yuri Kulich. You have two good goal scorers in Kulich and Norris paired with one of the best passers in the game in Mitch Marner. I think that top six is instantly elite. I think that is a top 5, top 6 in the league, if I'm being honest. Maybe top 10, but I think you can make a legit argument that that would be a top 5. Then the third line, Benson, McLeod, Zucker. You have 3 hard-nosed guys who can move the puck around and can all put it in the back of the net. All of them, I think next year put together, you could get a combined 45, 50 goals out of them, which isn't anything crazy. For all of them could be 40 to 50 point guys next year with with a combined 45 to 50 goals. I think that would be great out of that. And then your fourth line, you'd be Peyton Krebs. Since you trade away Lafferty and Lafferty and Krebs, then you have to call someone up. I think Isaac Rosen's been absolutely killing it in the AHL, and I think you either have to bring him up or trade him. I get sticking him on the fourth line, but Beck Melanson and Jordan Greenway aren't like the worst fourth liners ever. They offer some offensive value. They both can hit hard and they both have some speed. So I think you put Rosen with them too, and I think that could be a pretty formidable fourth line. I think that was our 4 pairings or our 4 lines going into next season, I think we instantly have a top 5 offense in the league, which hasn't really been the issue, but that would be pretty elite. And that brings us to the defense core. I think you go and get Neil Poink from Winnipeg. He's a left shot defenseman. I think Winnipeg's going to have a similar where they lose in the first or second. I think they could probably win in the first round against Calgary, and then they lose in the second round. It's like, we just won the President's Trophy and lost in the second round. We're clearly outmatched by these other teams, and I think they might want to change things up. Let someone like him walk. I think a Marner is going to cost 12 to 13. So you're at, before you get Poink, that brings you down to about, I would say, $13 million. Poink, you can give him maybe $7 million. That brings you down to $6 million. Then you have Dahlin, Poink, Power, Jared Bernard, Dockert, and then Ryan Johnson and Jacob Bryson. And that bottom pair can kind of be, you fill people in, but Johnson and Bryson, I think right there could be a very good third line. If you can make improvements on that, whatever you get from trading away Byram's rights, other prospects, that brings us into the regular season with that being our lines and about $5 million cap space to go and make moves at the trade deadline. I think that would be the ideal offseason, in my opinion. Say Bernard Docker just isn't really working out next to Power. We have the picks, we have the prospects. We go and get his replacement. Or maybe that third pairing isn't doing enough. We go get his replacement, or someone big gets injured. We can go and replace them, and we can give up extra picks and prospects for it to be money retained, because we still haven't traded really any of our picks away besides a second, and we still have a decent prospect pool to trade from. And then I think you probably want to go and get a veteran goalie and just I'd keep Levi down in the AHL again next year. And then the year after that, I personally would call him up and see how he is. And hopefully he's developed by then, where we can maybe get out of UPL's contract, because I know it's just 1 year. I know the defense core has been awful in front of him. I get he hasn't really put in a good position, but he has looked pretty bad this year. And goals saved above expected, I think it's out of like 90 goalies, UPL is ranked like 65th right now, like -4. He has been not great. He has a save percentage at under 900. His goals against is over 3. Like, just not a very good season for him so far. Like Reimer, in the same situation, has a goal saved above expected of like 4. I get he's a backup goalie, doesn't play a lot, but still, like, he is produced-ish in the same position that UPL couldn't. Unlike last year, where UPL was elite, he's kind of fallen off this year, and it's not great. So that is what I would ideally want to see out of the Sabres next year. Again, do I expect us to get Marner or Poink? No, I expect us to go and get a bunch of randoms, because it's Kevin Adams and he'll just, I trust the guys we have in the room. Oh, no one wants to come here because we have taxes and not palm trees, and whatever bullshit he wants to give us in the offseason to continue to be inept. But that is my ideal offseason. As I bring it over to you, is there any moves you'd like to see us? I don't know if you made a line or anything you want to see.
See, I think that the Sabres lines for next season would be an interesting topic. So I kind of made like a little bit of a breakdown while you were talking. So right now, Paterka is our biggest free agent, in my opinion. I think we end up re-signing Paterka on a 5-year deal worth $6.825 a season. I think he takes a little bit of a pay cut from what he wants. Probably was going to want around 7 to 7.5, but I think he takes 6.825 if it was a longer term deal. So I think 3 years would be 7.5. I think 4 years would be like 7, and then 5 years 6.8. So I think we go ahead and give him 5 years. I think we want him here long term. And then my big fish would be 2 big fishes instead of 1 because we really still need forward and we need defense, obviously. So let's go get Brock Boeser. Brock Boeser does not want to extend long-term in Vancouver. He's going to be a free agent considering he didn't get dealt at the deadline, so nobody's going to be signing him long-term. I think we get him on draft night, or we could go ahead and just wait because he's not going to re-sign in Vancouver. So I think you could just wait it out and then end up taking him in free agency. I think he signs a 3-year deal worth $7.325 million, a little bit of a bridge deal for him. I think he's a lot like Zucker, just a better Zucker, basically, a younger Zucker. So because of that, I think that he's going to take 3 years, a nice little bridge deal for him, worth $7.325 million to add to that second line. So that would make my first line Paterka, Thompson, Tuck, my second line Kulich, Norris, and Boeser. So that would be the top 2 lines, and then you fill out everybody else with Benson, Zucker, and everybody, McLeod. So it'd be Benson, McLeod, and Zucker on that third line, and then the grinder line for the fourth line. Maybe go out and sign somebody for the fourth line. I didn't go that deep into it, though, where I signed somebody for the fourth line. That's where the randoms would come in. So I go out there, and I ended up doing all that with those guys. And then I also went out and got Neil Pionk, funny enough, because
That's
Neil
funny.
Pionk is a right shot defenseman, which is something we need desperately.
I meant right shot, not left shot. I mixed
Yeah,
it up
I
when
think
was
he
talking.
fits perfectly on a line with Owen Power as our second line defenseman. I think that he's going to go out there and get $6 million for 3 years from the Buffalo Sabres. I think it could be a little bit of an overpay. I think we could see $6.5 million in this market right now, just because the overall presence of a right shot defenseman. It's so much harder to find a right shot defenseman than it is a left shot defenseman that's actually good. And so because of that, with Neil Pionk being on the market, with us being desperate for one, maybe we overpay and pay him like 6.5. But I still think regardless, we're going to go out and try to make an effort at Neil Pionk if he doesn't choose to re-sign in Winnipeg, which I still don't think he will. Especially if they lose early in the playoffs, then most definitely he's a free agent because he's not going to want to continue to be on that team. And then my biggest fish here is Rasmus Andersson. I'm going to say it until I die or until he gets traded to someone else and I'm crying in my bed at 3 a.m. But either way, Rasmus Andersson to the Buffalo Sabres. I think we trade Bowen Byram's rights for Rasmus Andersson, and then we're also going to include a 3rd-round pick in 2027 because 2026 will be the draft after this. And we also traded our 2nd-round pick in 26, so I don't think we're going to trade our 3rd as well. So we trade a 3rd and a 5th from 2027 with Bowen Byram's rights, and we get Rasmus Andersson, who's on the final year of his deal at 4.6. I think it's going to come with a 2-year extension as well, worth $6.2 million AAV. I think that he is another right shot defenseman, and that's your number 1 D-man and up there with Dahlin. So our first line on defense, our second line and third line would all be filled out at that point. It would be Dahlin and Weegar, and then Power with Neil Pionk, and then your third line is Bernard Docker and Ryan Johnson.
You meant Anderson, not Weegar, right?
Yeah, Anderson, not Weegar. I don't know why I said Weegar. They play on the same team, goddamn.
I know. That's
very
why I know
different
that's how you mix
contracts,
it.
though. Very.
Yeah, I know that's how you mixed it up, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, but
I mean, at the end of the day, this is all wishful thinking because Kevin Adams will probably do none of it because he's a pussy, and Terry Bagula will allow that to happen as long as he saves money because he's cheap. And I don't really care if people want to hate on me for that. That is just the truth. And until he can prove otherwise, I'm going to continue to say it. But we're going to move into the sport that brings me more happiness because our team is actually good, and that would be the NFL. This morning, Terrell Bernard signed a 4-year, $50 million contract. A lot of mixed opinions. Some people don't think he played very well. People want to look up his PFF page and be like, oh, he was terrible. Others want to give it kind of excuse it for the surrounding cast he had, aka other linebackers, the defensive line in front of him. A lot of mixed opinions. I'm saying people that, oh, Steele, he could have got 15, 16. Oh, we should have gave him like 8. We could have paid other people with better value. What are your initial thoughts
On Bernard?
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, why fix something that isn't broken, in my opinion? I understand we could have maybe gone out and got somebody better. But at this point, do you really want to risk trying to get rid of him and then go sign somebody else that's cheaper, sure, but could potentially flame out or not fit the system or not be as good? You don't want to go out there and risk something like that in the middle of your prime years as a franchise right now. Go out and give him his payday. He's going to be here long term. Also, on top of that, I understand the stupid people that say he's so much more expensive. Sure, it looks like he's more expensive, but now we get to push some of that money back and actually have cap space for this offseason, which is the most important thing about this deal. So I really do think that overall it makes so much sense for the Buffalo Bills to go out there and re-sign Terrell Bernard. He's a leader on that defense. He's a captain for a reason. He's going to get his payday somewhere, and it better be in Buffalo, and it was. So I really like the deal personally. I know a lot of people can be a little annoyed about the fact that we gave up such a high amount of money for a player like a linebacker. I don't remember the last time we actually paid a linebacker, but realistically.
Matt Milano?
Yeah, I mean like middle.
Hey, I mean, I get what you're saying, but he kind of plays the exact same position.
Well, I guess. But
I get what you're saying, though. Okay, yes, because we let Edmonds walk, yes.
Well, yeah, and then before Edmonds, it was like Tanner Vallejo and Kiko Alonso. We never paid middle linebackers. We don't. And I think the last middle linebacker we actually paid maybe Daryl Talley back in the 90s. So realistically, it's been a while since we've seen a middle linebacker get the payday, but I like it. I think it's well warranted. Again, he's a captain for a reason. I like the fit in Buffalo. What's the point in going out and trying to bring in somebody to fit the system that may not fit the system and then have to worry about a hole in the defense there? So I really like it.
Yeah, I love this move, and I think he's worth like 15-ish. I think with the linebacker market going to go up with the salary cap boom, you're going to see Nick Bolton. He's going to, with Bernard's contract, he's going to get absolutely paid. So we're like,
he's going to the Panthers, bro.
Bean is ahead of the curve when it comes to paying people. He's usually really good at this. He pays people before and gets them at a discount. And the people that are like, oh, well, Terrell Bernard wasn't that good that last year. He was all over the place. Look at him on his PFF grades. The problem with PFF is I get what they're doing. They look at a play and you get a grade between -2 and 2. 2 being absolute perfect, -2 being like the worst thing ever. And then they average that out of 100. The problem with PFF is it does not take account. It does not bring in any context ever at all. It doesn't look at anything surrounding. It just looks at that player, what it does in that play. If you look at Terrell Bernard last year, in pass coverage, he was having to make up for Dorian Williams and Balin Spector's ineptitude in pass coverage. I like Dorian. I think Dorian's going to be a beast. He still needs to develop his pass coverage game. He's great against the run, but he's not good against the pass. So then Bernard was making up for that. So he was having to cover basically the entire field because they had no idea what they were doing. And then when Milano comes back, it really wasn't until the last game or two of the season and playoff time where he kind of was back in form. So Bernard was kind of making up for Milano's rust. And that's just in pass coverage. Against the run, which he was actually graded out to be decent, that he would have been even better, but the D tackles in front of him were awful. Eddie had an up and down year, and then Dwayne Carter had an up and down year and battled injuries, but our one techs were terrible. Austin Johnson sucked. Daquan Jones sucked. Jordan Phillips gives you a couple good plays a game. I like him as like a good energy 5th, 6th defensive tackle, but if he's getting valuable snaps, it's not that good. Like, they were not giving him any value at all in the run game. So, and he's an undersized guy. So he's a playmaker. He uses his instinct to try and fly up and make plays. But when we don't have D tackles that can take up the lineman in front of him who can eat double teams, it makes Terrell Bernard have to get blocked. These linemen can get to the second level and they can block Bernard, and a 350-pound guard versus Terrell Bernard, the 350-pound guard's just going to win because he's just so much bigger. And that's not a knock against Bernard. That's a knock against the defensive line. We can fix the defensive line and then have Milano come back to full health, which he looked like in the playoffs. Have Dorian Williams continue to develop. have the team around him be better. It's going to take a lot of pressure off Bernard, and he can go back to how he looked to start 2023 when he was playing with a healthy Milano and was just out of this world. And even with Dodson last year, where he was looking really good, you can have him back to being that playmaker. Yeah, he'll occasionally be out of position, but he makes plays. He's a good blitzer. He has a nice peanut punch. He gets a couple picks a year. He's a playmaker, and I'm fine with giving up a couple of big plays here or there if he makes big plays when it matters. And like he did last year with arguably the biggest play of the Bills season with that peanut punch on Mark Andrews that eventually led us to that win against Baltimore in the second and the divisional round. So I think it's a great deal. 25 mil guaranteed is perfect. The first 2 years fully guaranteed is what I'm assuming. I haven't seen the contract breakdown. And then you can get out of it very easy after that. If maybe he doesn't continue to develop or the ankle injuries or other injuries catch up and he is trouble staying on the field, it's an easy out. So because of that, I really like the deal. So I would give it an A. I think it's not his best deal of the offseason. That Shakir deal is still absolutely insane, especially if you're did you see the officials' numbers?
Yeah.
Only paying him 6.8 mil next year.
Yeah,
and then only adding in one void year of 1.8 mil. Like if I did the math on just like the AAV of the contracts between Bernard and Shakir, it adds up to about $25.5 million. On average, the salary cap's been going up about $20-30 million a year the last couple of years. So if you add that onto next year, the salary cap is expected probably to be about $300 million next year. That 25 mil is only about 8.5%. So you're paying your safety blanket on offense and your defensive captain 8.5% of the cap in year one. The cap's going to continue to go up, but their salary cap, as they continue, and they're going to be playing even better and better. And by the end of that deal, it's probably going to only be like 6 or 7% of the cap. With all of that extra money we were able to save, we can go out and we can afford. Now maybe we can bring in an edge rusher and pay Rousseau. We can go and make a lot of different moves because we're saving a lot of money there. And I just think it's an absolute great move by Beane to do this now before his money goes up, before the market can, because right now he's the 5th highest. I bet by this time next year, I don't even know if he'd be top 10 because that's just how the market works. So great job by Brandon Beane there. Yes. But that brings me into our next point. Who do you think is going to be the next Bills player to get re-signed?
I think it's Christian Benford.
What do you think the contract's going to be?
Ooh, contract for Christian Benford. I'm thinking like 4 years, 68. Something like that, I think would make a lot of sense. Maybe like 40 million guaranteed, like 10 million per. I do think that Christian Benford's next in line. I understand a lot of people are, what about Greg Rousseau? Well, I think there's still a chance we go out and get Garrett. And if we go out and get Garrett, or like maybe Trey Hendrickson now that he requested a trade, although that one's a little more unlikely to me because I don't think the Bengals would want to trade him to us. I think if anything, he goes to an NFC team. But I do think, personally, that we could see Christian Benford be next in line because Myles Garrett could be a Buffalo Bill. And then at that point, you're not going to pay Greg Rousseau because we now have Myles Garrett. We don't need to pay both the both defensive ends. And so because of that, I think that they're still waiting on Greg Rousseau just to see what's going on with that. Also, Greg Rousseau has a 5th-year option that we can still use. If anybody lost track of what the hell was happening with him, yeah, we drafted him in the 1st round out of Miami. So he has a chance to be put on the 5th-year option, which will probably be what happens. And then if that happens, you're not even going to have to worry about anything because for Christian Benford, he's a 6th-round pick out of Villanova. He's not going to have that option for the 5th year. And so because of that, I do think that Christian Benford's going to get paid first. I think we're going to worry about him. Another guy you can mention is James Cook, but I think that's going to be well deep into the offseason. We could see something after the draft before we see anything with James Cook at this point, especially after he said, I love you, Buffalo, on Twitter, basically X, whatever you want to call it. But basically, after he came out and said that, I just don't think he's going to want to come back at the price that we're willing to give him right now because he wants like 15 to 16 million a year. And he saw the Barkley extension, and he's like showing his interest in the Barkley extension. And it's like, if you think you're getting anywhere near that, bro, then you're as good as gone at this point. And I do think there's a lot of turmoil with that. Still think there's still something that we can figure out, but maybe it'll be later on. So for right now, I'm going to go with the safe bet, Christian Benford. I think 4 years, 68 is perfect for him. I think he's going to be cornerback number one, and you have to pay somebody at this point. Rasul Douglas is going to be gone. You're going to probably lose Hamlin. Rapp can't stay healthy. You don't really have another safety. Your cornerback number two, as of right now, would be Kaiir Elam and Teron Johnson, I guess. So it's just like, but I don't count Teron Johnson as corner too, because he's the slot guy. So when you looked at me like that, like I get it. Trust me. But I'm saying outside boundary corners, Benford's number one. Next is Kaiir Elam, and that's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah.
So because of that, you have to go out and pay somebody eventually, and I think Benford's the guy that you go out and pay. So.
Yeah, I think Benford is also going to be the next guy that get paid. I have him give him a little bit more. On Spot Track, his market value is $23 million a year. That would be the second highest paid corner behind Surtain. I don't think he's getting that much. Whoa. I would say 4 years, 70 to 75 mil, with incentives up to 80. And like, if he can playoff games, like if he actually stays healthy, maybe, or like interceptions, all pro stuff like that, where you could bring that up. And then I had 45 mil guaranteed, where it's the first 2 years fully guaranteed, and then some guarantees into that third year. And then you can get out after that fourth year, so it doesn't turn into a Trey White scenario where we have to eat so much money to get off of him. If worst case scenario, he can't stay healthy. I do think the Benford one comes first. I think the Greg Rousseau one, I have a feeling that I think what might be best is we sign him, and then we try and work on a trade with him to Cleveland. I think, because if we're not going to get Myles Garrett, then I want Greg Rousseau. It's just, if we get Myles Garrett, put him in, because I'd rather give up Greg Rousseau than the extra pick, and then let Greg Rousseau, because then we wouldn't be able, it would just be so hard to afford both of them. Right. So I think you give Greg Rousseau the extension, and then you work on trading. If Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry get their head out of their asses and actually do their franchise legend right, and trade him, because apparently the owner won't even meet with them. They're like, oh, the GM will deal with it. You suck. You're a piece of shit. But anyways, I think that that's still kind of like a pipe dream best case scenario that we get Garrett. Realistically, that we don't get him. I think you go into next year with Greg Rousseau is still your best defensive end, and that's totally fine. But that brings me into other edge rusher news. Obviously, the Myles Garrett stuff. Trey Hendrickson was just got permission to seek a trade. The Bengals don't want to pay him. The Titans cut Harold Landry. The Chargers cut Joey Bosa. And then Max Crosby got a 3-year, $106 million extension with the Raiders. So that basically takes him off the market. I know he was talking about wanting to win, but he clearly just chose money instead, which I don't hate on him for it. I mean, you go get your bag. I mean, that's a lot of money. So that kind of leads it where it's like Myles Garrett's the clear best option. Then Trey Hendrickson's the clear best option after that. And then if you don't want to go trade, it brings you to like a Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Harold Landry, someone like that to bring some more juice. Is there any of those guys outside of Garrett, because obviously Garrett's like number one, that you kind of like prefer? Do you prefer us to trade for Hendrickson, or just go and get someone in free agency cheaper?
I don't think we go after Hendrickson. I think he'd cost way too much at this stage, because I just think that I don't know. I think it's just not going to happen for Trey Hendrickson. I think they're going to want way too much for him, and I think they're going to inflate the price knowing that we're a rival of them as well. So I think that's a big thing. But more importantly, I do think that my two favorites, if we go after anybody in free agency, are Joey Bosa and Harold Landry. I like Harold Landry because he can also play linebacker, and we have a really cool conundrum with Matt Milano getting injured all the fucking time. So having the flexibility of him being able to play linebacker if an injury happens and then just go back to what we're used to with Epenesa at the end, I'd be completely cool with a situation like that, but play him at edge rusher until knock on wood, unless something happens to Milano. And then for Joey Bosa, I think is a very similar situation. Was drafted as a left outside linebacker, has since moved to defensive end and played a lot better. I think Joey Bosa isn't really the greatest guy, though, to be honest, but I wouldn't mind Joey Bosa. It's just a matter of consistency with him. He can be inconsistent a lot of the time, but he's that pass rusher that we desperately want. So realistically, I think that Joey Bosa being the pass rusher, I think the overall flexible Harold Landry would work well in the system as well. So those would be the two guys that I'd like out of all of them.
Yeah, personally, my favorite guy out of the bunch, because you're right, I wouldn't want to go after Hendrickson because we wouldn't be able to afford him and Rousseau. The reason Garrett works is because you just trade Rousseau to get Garrett. You can't really trade
Exactly. And
Rousseau to
even
get
more importantly with the Garrett thing is Garrett's like the best defensive end in the league. Like
I think he's
hands
the
down.
best. I think he's the best defensive player in the league, in my
Exactly.
opinion.
But like
I think he's the best. I think he's the most valuable
with that.
Yeah, I think he's the most valuable non-quarterback in the league personally. But yeah, yeah, exactly. It's kind of close at the top there. But anyways, and with Hendrickson, he's obviously like a or like a 1B tier in the pass rushers, like the upper echelons, like you'd probably say Miles, TJ, Micah, and
I think
Max.
if I'm
And then
being
Hendrickson's
for real,
probably
I
that
think
second
Hendrickson
tier.
might be a little bit better version than Greg Rousseau.
Yeah, and the thing is, with Hendrickson being 31, neck injuries, you wouldn't give up Greg Rousseau to get him, and because of that, you can't
No.
afford both of them. So you would basically be giving up a second round pick to rental Trey Hendrickson, and he clearly doesn't want that. That's why he requested a trade out of Cincinnati. He wants an extension before the season, so it just wouldn't work. Plus, would Cincinnati really want to trade Hendrickson to a conference rival in us? Wouldn't really make a lot of sense. So personally, I'd let him go to like Washington, so it takes a suitor out of the Myles Garrett race. Let Washington go get him, so then that's one less team that's vying for Myles Garrett, or maybe Detroit or something. So
Jonathan
then, again,
Allen's a Bill, baby.
I was going to get into that. Yeah, I don't want him either. But so yeah, Khalil Mack is the number one guy I want. I think he's one of the better pure pass rushers available in the free agent market.
Went to Buffalo.
Yeah, exactly. He went to college here. He knows the area. He can play, obviously, in the bad weather. He played college here. And I think he would. I think it'd be a cool reunion and play in Chicago. I think it'd be a cool reunion for him to come home. So, or well, not home, but come back here where he spent a couple years in college. So I would really like that. I think it all depends also on the Von Miller situation. What we do with him, if we pay cut, this, that, or the third. I am not really sure exactly what we do in that situation. So, but if we do go get someone, I think Khalil Mack would be my favorite. But this leads me into our next piece. There's another guy that Bills fans have been discussing that they want to trade for, and that would be DK Metcalf. I just saw a report earlier that it looks like the Panthers, the Patriots, and the Chargers or not the Chargers, the Steelers are the three teams. The Patriots are like the favorite, but then apparently the Chargers were targeting him heavy last year, so they're probably a sleeper team. Buffalo is probably a sleeper team also. Where do you think he should go? Where do you think is the best fit for
him? Wait, where do you think who goes?
DK Metcalf. Where do you think is best fit?
I thought you said Metcalf. I just didn't want to be stupid and say somebody else. Okay, so
that's fair.
With Metcalf, I think there's a few different suitors here, but one team stands out to me a lot, and that's the Chargers. I think the Chargers make a lot of sense for DK. He'd be wide receiver 1. You could put McConkey in the slot, whoever you want at wide receiver 3. I don't really care. Maybe draft somebody. Or keep going with Quentin Johnston.
He had like 750 yards last year.
Who did, Quentin Johnston?
Yeah, he could be a decent wide receiver 3.
As long as he can catch touchdowns, that's all that matters. But
as long as he can catch the football.
Yeah, right, Kadarius Toney. But I guess we'll see what ends up happening with that. I do think that DK Metcalf, a very good team for him, would be the Chargers. I think that fits their what they would want, what they need. I mean, they have a good quarterback in Justin Herbert. He just doesn't have any pass-catching options outside of Ladd McConkey last year, and it's rookie season Ladd McConkey. So I'm sorry, but like I think he's going to be way better this year than he was last year. Like I still think he was a good guy. He was a dog, but when he's blanketed, there's nobody for him to throw the ball to. We saw that very evident in the wild card game. I think just basically at this point, they're going to have to lean a little bit more on the pass than they did last season. Obviously, that run-heavy football didn't really go too well for them last year in the playoffs. So because of that, I do think that they're going to go out and make a move for a receiver. A lot of people keep saying Devontae Adams. Well, I think that would make a lot of sense. I think that'd be very disgusting as well. But maybe a Keenan Allen reunion. That could be fun. I don't think that's going to happen, but who knows? But I also think that the Chargers could offer a very good package for DK Metcalf as well. And I think that would make a lot of sense for them. I think they could definitely offer a pick. I could definitely see them offering their first round pick this year. And then, maybe like a pick next year too. Like maybe like a first this year and like a third next year or fourth. Like I could see something like that. So I do think that there's a lot of intriguing options, but I guess they'd be at the top of my board right now just because you want to trade them somewhere in the AFC. I don't think they're going to want to keep him within the conference. But if they were to trade him in conference, I think the Packers would make a lot of sense too. So I guess we'll see what ends up happening with that. But another, like, obviously the Packers could make a lot of sense for it. So like maybe like they trade one of those receivers, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson back, and then a first. I could see that too. So I don't know what'll happen with him, but where do you think he goes?
I think he, as much as I don't want to see it because it's in division rival, I think the Patriots do make the most sense, or the Panthers. I think those are two teams with young quarterbacks that are really lacking a true wide receiver one. And I think Metcalf can kind of be that guy. Well, I don't think Metcalf's ever going to be like a top 10, 15 receiver. He can be he's a top 20 receiver, which is a wide receiver one. And he offers a lot of value to teams. So I really like him at either of those spots. They have the draft capital. They have the cap space to be able to go and give him the money he wants. And it'll really help with their young quarterback to be able to develop. I mean, or I wouldn't be upset if Bean steps in at last second and gives up like 62 for him. I think that would be a very good fit here. I understand we need to be defense focused, but we do need a vertical threat receiver. I think Metcalf would fit very well, and that offense would just be so disgusting. Like, look at how good it was last year with no vertical threat. So we were facing single high 60% of the time because they weren't scared of us down the field. Then you had one of the best deep threats in the game. Like that would be very, very good. I'm a little worried about maybe character concerns of him not getting enough targets because of the everyone eats mantra, but just him as the player, like that exact play style would be perfect for Buffalo. But I think he ends up in New England. They seem very aggressive on getting a wide receiver one, and with T. Higgins being salary or being franchise tagged, I think it kind of just makes sense there. So I think he ends up in New England. That's reports I'm seeing. I don't really want it to happen because I think Drake
they pick a receiver. I think that's why I wouldn't pick them to get him.
Well, I don't think they pick. I think they realize that a receiver at 4 probably doesn't make that much sense.
They're going to trade back. I think they trade back. I think they pull a Cardinals with the Texans.
That's possible, but I could also see them just wanting to get whoever the best tackle is on their board. Whoever's tackle 1 on their board, and then draft it, and then trading maybe like their second or maybe like their third this year, their third next year, or their second next year, or something like that. Because I think teams are looking for more picks next year because next year's class is getting better. I think they could do something like that and then still draft a receiver because the receiving core, even with Metcalf, is still lacking after him. It's just an awful core there. And I'm a Drake May truther. I think he's going to be an absolute beast. I've been on him since he was coming out of college. I think he's going to be the second best quarterback in the AFC East next year. And I don't really want to face him when he has a good roster around him. But as a football fan, it makes a lot of sense for him to go there. So I'm going to go with the Patriots. As this brings into, I guess there's a couple more things to talk about. We haven't had an episode since the Deebo Samuel trade went down. Christian Kirk got traded and Jonathan Allen was released. I think those are probably the 3 big things left. I'll start out with Deebo Samuel to the Commanders for a 5th round pick. Who do you think wins this trade? What are your grades or whatever?
I think that the trade's very even. I think that Deebo just makes a lot of money, but I think that he fits pretty much what the other Samuel, when he played for the Commanders, what he did. So basically he can run, he can throw. I think he just offers a lot of flexibility in that offense. I think he'd be a great complementary to Terry McLaurin. I don't think he's got to be a wide receiver 1. I don't even think he's got to be a number 2 if they keep De'Ami Brown either. So I think that there's still a chance that he could be like the wide receiver 3 on that roster. And because of that, I really like the move for the Commanders. It's a 5th round pick. Like, come on. It's a 5th round pick. Who cares? But I think I like it for the 49ers more just because you're finally getting rid of the headache that has been Deebo Samuel. It's just been crazy to see this whole process with him. Like, I just think that he's a great player. Yes, and he's definitely not as great as he used to be. but I still think he can be a solid player in a systematic role. And I think that's exactly what the Commanders understand. And I think that's why they did this. I'm not sure how much money they are paying him after this trade. They're probably paying his whole contract, right? Like,
Yeah, they took on the entirety of the contract. That's why it's only a fifth.
Yeah, so that definitely bumps it down a little bit for me. I'd say like a C right now, just to see where it goes. I guess not literally why I did that, but I think to see where it goes, I'm gonna say like a C for the Commanders. C for Commanders, and then for the 49ers, I think that this is an A. I think you get off the contract of Deebo Samuel. You get a decent pick back, I guess, in return. You know what? I'll say B plus just because it wasn't the greatest of a pick. I think it's a good pick, but it's like you're getting rid of the headache and you're getting rid of the contract. I like the move.
Yeah, I think the Niners won this trade. I think everyone's saying they got fleeced. I think just doesn't understand contracts and players based on name value. They're just name valuing players and they don't understand how salary cap works. But I think I would also, that's what I was going to give the 49ers for this, a B plus. Basically, this is just a salary dump, and then you got a fifth round pick that John Lynch in the past has gotten some gems in the fifth round. So that could turn into something. And then for the Commanders, I would give them a B here. I think Deebo fits a role here. Cliff Kingsbury obviously loves like short passes and screens. And we know how good, despite Deebo's issues, we know how good he is at screens and those quick little passes. He's great after the catch. And the Commanders ranked like they were one of the worst yak teams in the league last year. So I think he fits a need on that team. I wouldn't give him any higher because they are giving him that much money for him to be like basically like a yak merchant. He's getting, I think like someone like Shakir is getting paid like $13 million a year and is a better yak merchant than Deebo, and they're basically the same player, and Deebo's getting $18 million a year. I get the Commanders have a lot of money, so that's why I don't think it's that bad for them to be able to take on this contract, because by the time he's up, it's not like they have big contracts kicking in. His contract's up before Jane Daniels' rookie deal's up, and they just cut Jonathan Allen. So they easily have cap space for him. So I do like it in that aspect. I think that they had the cap space. Might as well go fill out that wide receiver room to improve that offense. So I think a B plus there and for the Niners and a B for the Commanders. And then there's not really much that needs to be talked about for grades for the Texans and the Texans Christian Kirk trade because they basically just gave up a 7th round pick, so he didn't hit free agency. The Jaguars were going to cut him, and then a team offered them a 7th, and it's like, well, we're saving the same cap either way. Might as well take the 7th with it. It was basically so we just didn't have to go to free agency. So I mean, I like the deal for Houston. I like that they got Kirk. It looks like maybe they don't really want Diggs coming
from the Jags, though. I don't think I would have done it. I think I would have just cut him. I don't want him to go to a division rival.
I guess that's fair, but
it's a 7th round pick. What are you going to draft?
But at the same time, I mean, you could, but I get that. I think that's a good deal for the Texans and the Jaguars. They got a 7th round pick out of someone they plan on cutting. So I think it's whatever. You save that cap space, and maybe you go and get Chris Godwin or Cooper Kupp.
Kirk with his 3rd touchdown of the game. The Jaguars are really regretting this trade.
But unless they get if they get a Kupp or a Godwin, someone who
I would love Godwin because he stays in Florida. I think that makes so much sense. But
Kupp also makes a lot of sense.
Cohen.
Yeah, well, Liam Cohen was the Rams offensive coordinator 2 years ago, so he's familiar with both of them. So I think
you're right.
I think either guy there makes a lot of sense to pair with Brian Thomas Jr. and a healthy Trevor Lawrence. I think that offense. I know this has bit people in the ass the last couple of years, but I'm a Jaguars truther this year because I've always thought T-Law better than he is. And if you know anything about me, you know I love McVay guys. The McVay offensive scheme just amazes me, and it never fails. So basically.
Right now.
I think that I don't know how good the Jags are going to be as a team. I just think that offense.
I think they can finish with 9 wins if they get peak.
I think that defense is probably not going to be great, and the offense is still going to have some issues.
They get Will Johnson.
I think or maybe even Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter would work there a lot too.
Hear me out. Get Will Johnson, trade back into the 1st round, and get Malachi Starks.
Yeah, I mean, we could. That's something we can talk about in a later episode. We plan on doing a mock draft post free agency, so stay tuned for that one in a couple of weeks. as we get into our final piece of news, Jonathan Allen was just officially released today as they couldn't find a trade partner for him. That saves, I think, the Commanders like $16 million cap, basically the Debo contract.
Literally.
Yeah, they basically cut Jonathan Allen and gave up a 5th-round pick to get Debo. So that makes a lot. 30-year-old that is kind of towards.
They
the
were
end
cutting
of his prime.
Jonathan Allen anyway, unless they found a trade partner.
Exactly. I've seen a lot of Bills fans say, "Please sign Jonathan Allen."
I hate that this entire offseason's just been Bills fans. Every time somebody gets cut, oh my God, we should bring him in. Fuck off.
You have to build based on fit. And Jonathan Allen is a 30-year-old 3-tech defensive
Christian
tackle.
Kirk's set to be released. Oh my God, he's Josh Allen's friend.
Yeah, but because we need a third slot receiver. That was my thought. It's like, we definitely need a third.
People are so fucking annoying with that. Like, dude, oh my God, he's Josh Allen's buddy. So was Tanner Gentry. We got rid of him.
Yeah, it was his high school buddy. Exactly.
Right. Like,
so was Jacob Hollister.
Yeah, let's go get Jake Hollister. Oh my God, we're releasing Quentin Morris. Let's go get Jake Hollister.
I haven't heard of that name since we had him on the roster.
I will Kadarius Toney the fuck out of all of you.
But anyways, Jonathan Allen's 300 pounds and he's a 3-tech. I don't want to, unless it's like a complete backup, like just depth piece. I don't want to see us bring in a single defensive tackle that is under 310 pounds. If you are under 310 pounds, stay away from Buffalo. I do not care. We need 1-tech big boys who can take up
Walter Nolan,
Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon, Alfred Collins, Deion Walker. There's so
Collins
many guys.
Collins in the second, please.
And then in free agency, DJ Jones, Tier Tart, Sebastian Joseph Day. I think you bring in one veteran.
Joseph Day.
And
Joseph Day.
I just I
know I saw that. You said Joseph Day.
I think that you bring in one veteran and you draft one guy, and I think you pair the better run defender with Dwayne Carter, and you pair the better pass rusher with Ed Oliver, and then you have Dwayne and the guy we bring in that's the run defender on early downs, and then you have Eddie and the other guy for pass rushing situations. Yep. I think that would be I think that's a top 10 defensive line core in the league. Obviously, only time will tell what exactly happens, but Jonathan Allen is not it.
No, please no. Yeah. I think he would fit well in Cincy, though.
Yeah.
Much as I would dislike that.
All right. Well, that is all we have for you guys today. Stay tuned, as next week is going to be a very big episode, as we're going to have a lot of Bills news to get into and a lot of NFL news in general, as it is free agency week. Then the following week, we're going to do a free agency mock draft, and then it's March Madness. So we'll maybe have a little fun with that too, but stay tuned for more episodes. I hope you guys all have a great day.